All right, we are live. Hope everyone is having a very good Friday night. I'm going to give this a second just to get up and running. As always, we have Den who is helping me out moderate the comments, and he'll leave messages in the thread. He'll sign his name on it. If you're around, say hi in the comment thread just so we know you're there. Also, you can always support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. And of course, leave your super chats and we'll definitely get to them in between stories. I would also say a quick housekeeping note. I may be around next weekend, maybe Saturday instead of the usual time. And then I'm going to be gone for a couple of weeks while I'm out of town. However, talking with Den, he was wondering if people may want to get together if I'm out of the picture, daddy's away, might want to play. And if you're interested in that, you can go to the Discord server that we have. Den's going to leave a link to it. And if you're interested in that, we can figure that out as well. So Den's going to figure that out in a bit. In the meantime, I figured we would get started. I'll say that one more time since he's there. Den will leave a link to the Discord server and all that if you're interested in that, and that'll take place when I'm gone. Okay, I wanted to get started this week by talking about the Southern Baptist Convention because this week they had their big annual meeting. And I think there's a question. I don't see this being discussed in a lot of atheist circles as much as I feel like it should be. So why does this matter? Why does it matter that the Southern Baptists had their annual meeting? It sounds like whatever, the Mormons meet, every so often. Jehovah's Witnesses meet every so often. The reason this matters is because we're talking about the largest Protestant denomination in the country, and this is where the decisions are made. What's decided at this annual meeting has an impact on how tens of millions of Americans learn about Christianity and what being a good Christian means. So what they decide here does matter. And there was a lot of stuff that was decided and that they talked about and voted on. So we're going to talk about that. Let me start off by talking about the sexism on display there, because one of the first things that came up, they met on Tuesday and Wednesday of this past week. And one of the easiest votes they took was on whether one particular church should be allowed to remain in the Southern Baptist Convention. And I will show you what everyone was mad about. So check this out. This is the website for this church, the First Baptist Church of Alexandria in Virginia. And here's what got everyone's rankles up and stuff. You look at their website and their leadership page. Yeah, normal. Oh, what is this? We have a woman who is a pastor for children and women. She's not allowed to, preach in front of men. However, they do let her preach in front of children, like a Sunday school teacher, and she can preach to other women, and they gave her the title of pastor. And that is something that is iffy when it comes to Southern Baptists. But what really got to them was this part of their website where they share their beliefs. And there's a lot of stuff in here, what they think about everything. But let me scroll down to this last little bit. What do they say about the role of women in ministry? And this is important, so check this out. We believe the testimony of Scripture not only permits women to serve in the offices of pastor and deacon, but confirms this with examples by name. In this regard, the early church was bold in overturning the cultural norms of its day, and we are similarly confident and grateful that God equips women to serve the current church too, as he has for generations past. And that is what we like to call in the business blasphemy. Because what they're saying is, yeah, we know we had that woman who is a pastor of children and women, but we're not going to just stop there. We're saying, you know what? Women can be pastors too. The Bible says so. And for that reason, this idea that women can be leaders in ministry, that is so offensive to the sort of people who decide these sorts of things at the Southern Baptist Convention that they voted to just kick out that church. Let me tell you the vote count: 6,759 to 563. It was like more than 90% of the delegates who attended this meeting were like, yeah, you got to get this place out of there. They think too highly of women. They think women can do the work of men. They don't belong in our little club here. So they got rid of that church. Um, so that was part of it. That was part of the problem. The funniest thing about that, maybe, I mean, it's not funny, it's disturbing, but it's funny because obviously what they did is so boneheaded. But the thing is, this church has been around for a long time. They have had women pastors, not like the head of the church, but like next level on the hierarchy. They have had women in this particular church. But according to the Associated Press, the pastor of a neighboring church ratted them out 2 years ago and tattled to the SBC headquarters and said, you guys, they let women do manly stuff here, like teach the Bible. And it finally culminated in the SBC saying, all right, we're kicking you out of the club. So that was part one of what happened when it came to sexism, but that wasn't the thing that made headlines. The thing that made headlines, before I go there, I should say that particular church that has women pastors, associate pastors, I should tell you that that church is not progressive in any other meaningful way. They are anti-LGBTQ. They are anti-same-sex marriage. They are not your friends. They are not your allies, but they happen to think women can lead in certain ways. And because of that, they were kicked out of the church. By the way, a couple years ago, was it last year or 2 years ago? They kicked out Rick Warren's Saddleback Church because they had ordained women to be pastors as well. So, like, this is a thing they've been doing here. Okay, but all of that was prelude to the bigger story. Because what happens at these conventions is that anyone can say, I want to make a suggestion, and we all have to vote on it. And like, it's like a deli counter. You all pick a number, and then they say, all right, number 30, you're up. Tell us your idea. And like last year, one of the dudes that was called, his name was Mike Law, and he said, I have a proposal to make. What if we just kicked out any church that says women can be pastors, that has women in like leadership? Like maybe you can call them like assistant servants to the men, but you can't call them pastors. Let's kick out every church that lets women be pastors, or at least openly supports the idea like this church did. And the thing is, if you make an amendment like that in convention to like formally adopt it, you have to pass that vote with a 2/3 majority 2 years in a row. So last year they took a vote on it and it got like 80% of the vote. It passed. So the question was, what's going to happen this year? Are they going to do it again? Are they going to make this into a rule that everyone has to follow? And one of the problems with this law amendment, named after the dude who proposed it, is that a lot of people questioned, well, what does it mean when you say women can't be pastors? What if we have a woman who's a Sunday school teacher at our Baptist church? Like, does she qualify as a pastor, even though we don't let her in the pulpit? Like, can we, if we say she's an associate pastor, does that count? What if we just said she's not a pastor, but she's a Sunday school leader? Does that make her a pastor? Are we going to kick out those churches? No one seemed to know what they meant by pastor, because a lot of Southern Baptist churches will have men at the top of the pyramid, but women elsewhere in the pyramid. And there was an open debate on, well, does all of that count as pastor or not? No one knew. And if you say women can't be anywhere in the leadership hierarchy, guess which churches would have been kicked out? Probably not the rich white mega churches, but a lot of rural churches that can barely find volunteers to do anything. So if a woman is present and wants to help out, they'll say, all right, well, please take charge. We need your help. Also, a lot of black churches, they say more often than white churches, like, women can absolutely be leaders and help out. So if the Southern Baptist Convention passed this law a second year in a row, they might have seen an exodus of a lot of rural churches and black churches, which is not a good look for an already overwhelmingly white denomination. And guess what happened when they finally took the vote on this thing? This is from Kate Shellnut, who's a reporter from Christianity Today. Law amendment on male pastorate fails, fails, I should say, to reach the 2/3. Here was the vote, if you could see this. And it's roughly 61% to 38%, which means they didn't hit the 66.6% that they needed for it to pass. So the law amendment failed. They are not going to automatically kick out churches that have women in leadership, which is nice. I don't know that that's a victory for feminism in any sort of way. I mean, it's not really a victory when the majority of Southern Baptist delegates say, yeah, we support the only men in power doctrine. um, and by the way, so what this means is, I guess if you have a church that has a woman who has a title of pastor, you're not automatically kicked out, but you might be, like that church in Virginia was. Who knows? So I guess, I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It's not a good look either way. You know, the fact that this rule was even an issue, like, should we allow women in church leadership? The fact that that was even being discussed and voted on tells you a lot about where the SBC is at. Like, they're literally arguing about a mild version of gender equality while the rest of their house is on fire. Okay? Sexual abuse runs rampant in the SBC, and they're debating whether, like, women are people. And for the majority of delegates this year and last year, they want women labeled as like servants and let them keep doing the same work or something. So I guess yay for the women who are Baptists. I don't know. It doesn't sound great. Some churches that have women in leadership roles have already decided to walk away from the SBC, regardless of how this vote was going to go, because they saw the writing on the wall. They know they're not wanted there. Which I also don't get, because like these people were fine being part of a historically racist and currently anti-LGBTQ organization, but punishing churches that have women in leadership, that was their bridge too far. Like, all right, someone make that make sense to me. All right, so telling women they are capable of spreading the gospel, I would think, if I were running the show, saying that, you know what we need? We want more people preaching the gospel. I would think that's a good marketing strategy. And making sure that more women are out there, more people of color out there, I would think that's a good look for the denomination. And apparently the whole denomination, the majority of them are like, nope, just men. I don't know, not my problem. This also means that the majority of Southern Baptists in America, they want to force underage girls to bear their rapist babies, but they can't handle a grown woman in the pulpit. Okay, so that was another thing they voted on at the SBC annual meeting. Then we get to talk about in vitro fertilization, because they didn't have a law. They weren't going to change their constitution, but they did discuss IVF because they were wondering, what should we say about it? It's in the news. What should we do? And if you saw the headline here, this is from the New York Times. The vote was not great. Southern Baptists vote to oppose use of IVF. With almost 13 million church members across the U.S., the Southern Baptist Convention has long been a bellwether for American evangelism. But what exactly does that mean? What did they vote on? Let me show you what they voted on. They have a whole packet full of resolutions to vote on, non-binding resolutions. These are things Southern Baptists say we support, but if you disagree, they're not going to necessarily kick you out or anything. And like, just to show you this, on the ethical realities of reproductive technologies and the dignity of the human embryo, most of this is fluff and it doesn't matter. But here's the part that does matter on page 2. Look at these top 3 paragraphs here. Whereas IVF most often engages in the destruction of embryonic human life and increasingly engages in dehumanizing methods for determining suitability for life and genetic sorting based on notions of genetic fitness and parental preferences. Okay, so IVF is destructive and dehumanizing. There's one paragraph. Next paragraph here. Whereas estimates suggest that between 1 million and 1.5 million human beings are currently stored in cryogenic freezers in an embryonic state throughout the US, with most unquestionably destined for eventual destruction. They call these embryos human beings, which destroys the definition of human beings. And therefore, what do they resolve? That the messengers to the SBC meeting in Indianapolis right now call on Southern Baptists to reaffirm the unconditional value and right to life of every human being, including those in an embryonic stage, and to only utilize reproductive technologies consistent with that affirmation. Okay, let's talk about what that means in reality here. Okay, what is IVF? IVF is when you take sperm and ova and you join them outside the body in like a laboratory dish. It is meant to help couples who are infertile, struggling to get pregnant, have other health problems. And the concern for the anti abortion crowd is that in IVF, the embryos that are not, I mean, usually when the doctor is taking your eggs, they're not taken like one at a time because then you would have to keep going back if it didn't work. So the doctor may take several eggs at once and then they store them and freeze them for when you're ready to use them. Because it's also possible some of those embryos don't make it. Turns out they're defective, whatever. And then you might have, let's say, 2 IVF babies, and you and your partner decide, you know what, I'm good. We're done now. And then the hospital would have to destroy the remainder of the embryos. And the Southern Baptists are like, that's murder. Meanwhile, they're like, mass shootings? Who cares? That murder doesn't matter. More guns for everybody, because they're Southern Baptists. But the concern here is that these Southern Baptists with this resolution are saying IVF as a procedure, the way it is done, is dehumanizing and destructive. And when you throw out those other cryogenically frozen embryos, you're committing mass murder. And it's the only kind of mass murder they care about. And they call them little teeny tiny human beings. And so they voted on that resolution, and that resolution passed. Okay, so they pass it. So what does that matter? It is a thoughtless statement from a heartless organization. It is also a slap in the face to all the Christian women, and that includes plenty of Southern Baptist women, who have used IVF to have babies. They think it's a miracle. These people have been brought up. They've been brought up to think the best role for a woman, definitely not in the pulpit, it's to just stay at home, cook some food, and spit out the babies. 1 a year, be a Duggar. That's what they've been taught is their worth. It's how many babies they can pop out. And if for whatever health reason they cannot do that, IVF gave them a chance to have babies, and so they used it. And here's the Southern Baptist saying, oh, but you shouldn't have done that, you murderer. And so there were plenty of people that spoke up before they voted on this resolution, and they were like, don't pass this resolution. IVF helped my family. My children are born because of IVF. We want to have more children. We need to use IVF. And the Southern Baptists are like, shut up, woman. Go sit down. Why are you here? Let's vote against IVF. And the thing is, I don't care that this is a non-binding resolution. It's that what the Southern Baptists say will trickle down into Southern Baptist churches. This means, let's say, you go to a Baptist church and you and your partner go to your pastor and say, we want to have a baby. We're thinking about using IVF, pastor. What do you say about that? The pastor is going to have to tell them, as Southern Baptists, we don't like IVF. Don't you dare use it. What do you think is going to happen when Republicans in like primary elections say, you know, I don't like what the Alabama Supreme Court said when they compared it to murder. Like even in Alabama, the legislature was like, too far. Let's make sure it's legal. Ted Cruz sponsored a bill saying IVF is okay. Like that's where Republicans are at right now. IVF is popular. Republican policies are not. And here's the Southern Baptist Convention saying, nope, we're all on board against IVF. Of course, they're going to start trashing Republican politicians who say IVF is okay. Abortion is murder, but IVF is okay. They're going to go after those people now. This is going to tell a lot of Southern Baptists how to vote. And they'll put more pressure on Republicans to take the most extreme, thoughtless position on reproductive technologies. Let me show you how Politico described this, because I thought this was well put here. Though the resolution is non-binding, nearly 13 million Southern Baptists across 45,000 churches may now face pressure from the pulpit or in individual conversations with pastors to eschew IVF. We'll come back to that in a bit. I found that interesting. And also this, the Southern Baptist Wednesday vote could encourage other evangelical denominations and churches to follow suit in declaring or at least teaching about their ethical concerns with IVF. Like, what the SBC decides has a ripple effect on other churches and other Christians. It decides how Christians are going to get taught about this stuff. So that's disturbing. And all of this is happening while membership in the in the SBC is at a 47-year low. I made a video about this a couple of weeks ago, but in 2003, the Southern Baptists had a record high membership of like over 16 million members. Today, they are at under 13 million members. It is 17 straight years where they have lost membership. And now what are they doing? They are taking the most extreme positions on these very contentious issues. Like, they're saying even to conservatives, you are not conservative enough. And I don't know how any of this stuff brings people into the fold, which again, great, because I'm not looking forward to the Southern Baptists getting bigger, but I find it strategically idiotic. The other thing I wanted to mention, what else did they talk about at this annual meeting? They talked about sexual abuse. And in case you need a reminder, in 2022, there were newspaper reports out of Texas that said, we looked into the Southern Baptist Convention. We looked at their churches. The Southern Baptists are not like the Catholic Church where there's a top-down hierarchy. The Southern Baptists are like, they have a few people at the top who make some decisions, but every church is like an independent Burger King franchisee. They all do their own thing. But if you're part of the Southern Baptists, you like give the organization money to do mission work and things like that. And so what that makes it really hard to tell people, don't hire this person. They're a problem. And if you have someone in your church who turns out to be a predator and you get rid of them, there's nothing stopping that person from just walking 3 feet over to the next church and finding a job there. It's not like there's internal dialogue between these various churches. So what they found, these newspaper reporters found a couple of years ago, is that more than 250 Southern Baptist staffers or volunteers had been charged with sex crimes. Like, there were police reports about this stuff, and they had more than 700 victims. Then the Southern Baptists did their own investigation and said, sorry, you guys undercounted, reporters. We found 703 abusers. And like over 400 of them were directly affiliated with the SBC. Others maybe have been volunteers and stuff. It was so bad that the Department of Justice said, yeah, we're going to investigate the Southern Baptists. We know it's not a great look. Christians are going to say this is Christian persecution, but this is too big to ignore. We're going to investigate it. And in fact, last month, a former seminary professor became the first person indicted in the investigation. He has pleaded not guilty. So the question was, what is the Southern Baptist Convention actually going to do about this? The leadership, what are they going to do? And a couple years ago, they said, don't worry, everyone. We're going to investigate this ourselves. Last year, they assigned a task force to offer up some recommendations on how to move forward. They didn't give the task force a lot of money. It was a task force made up of volunteers and not paid workers who can dedicate themselves to this project. So that shows you how seriously they were taking it. So this week, when they met, there was a question of, okay, well, this task force says they're now closing up shop. What have they accomplished? And it turns out what they accomplished was virtually nothing. Let me show you this from Religion News Service right here. To date, actually, before I show you that, let me explain. One of the things they were supposed to do is create some resources that churches can use to deal with sexual abuse within their fold. They also wanted to create a website that listed all these problematic staffers. That way, at least everyone could be like, this person filled out the application to work at my church. Let me go look on the database to see if they appear on it, because, that would be bad. So they wanted to create a database of sex predators who work with the SBC. And here's what ended up happening. Again, this is Religion News Service. To date, no names appear on the Ministry Check website designed to track abusive pastors, despite a mandate from the Southern Baptists to create the database. They don't have that website. There are no names on it. The committee has also found no permanent home or funding for abuse reforms, meaning that 2 of the task force's chief tasks remain unfinished. Yep, we're not going to do anything. We don't have any money. Bye. And then this is interesting. Why don't they have a database of predators? Because of liability concerns about the database. So they set up a separate nonprofit to oversee it, but that new nonprofit has been unable to publish any names because of objections raised by SBC leaders. So there's no database. That was like, you had one job and you didn't do it. And I can't even blame them, because they weren't given the resources they needed to do it. Like, the only thing they were able to create was like some PDFs of what to do if there's a sex predator in your church. And like, it's a 1-line PDF, right? Call the police. That's pretty much all you got to do. What's amazing is that the Southern Baptist Convention they took in last year over $10 billion. They have the money to take this seriously and invest in protecting kids. They just don't care. Okay? They don't want to. They would rather form a volunteer task force than risk the world finding out just how many of their leaders are alleged abusers. I mentioned this last month too. Lifeway Christian Resources, which is an arm of the SBC, they did a survey of church leaders last month, and they found that only 58% of respondents said they even do background checks for staffers who work with children. Like, only 60% do background checks. What are the rest of them doing? Like, the abuse is gonna continue. So that was another shocking, but not really shocking thing that happened at the meeting. And then one other thing happened, which is that they elected a new president of the Southern Baptists. And I just want to show you the first line in a Religion News Service story about the new guy in charge. His name is Clint Presley. And again, I want to repeat, this is paragraph 1 of this article. Clint Presley, a North Carolina megachurch pastor known for a conservative but even keel approach to leadership, and who does not wear jeans in the pulpit, was elected president. He doesn't wear jeans, everybody. That's how you know he means business. I'm not making fun of RNS. I just find it interesting that this guy's claim to fame, I'll show you a picture of this dude. His claim to fame is that he wears like 3-piece suits in the pulpit, and he doesn't wear skinny jeans like those other pastors. Nope, he takes this stuff seriously, because as we know, Jesus always wore vests in the pulpit. So this is the new guy. He runs a mega church. What does it mean that this is the guy who's their new leader? Not that much. He's the same as everyone else. For what it's worth, he did support the law amendment that said no women allowed in leadership. And I should also tell you one other thing about this guy, which is at his church, guess what happened last month? A volunteer at Clint Presley's Hickory Grove Baptist Church, a Southern Baptist megachurch in Charlotte, North Carolina, a volunteer was arrested last month after church leaders learned he had been accused of sexual abuse by a student at the church's Christian school. And as you could see in the next paragraph, the guy in question allegedly sexually abused his daughter, and the daughter is the one that went to church leaders and said, "You guys, my dad is abusing me," which is very disturbing for obvious reasons. Now, to the church's credit, they said, "Oh no, let's take that to the cops because we can't deal with this," which is the right thing to do. And the cops later arrested this guy. And like, as far as I can tell, the church handled this properly. They reported it to secular authorities and worked with them as much as they could. The church also sent out an email letting the entire church know, hey, this dude was arrested for abuse. He's been with our church for a while. This is the first time we're hearing anything bad about this, but we're letting the whole church know because in case any of you have stories about this dude, we would like to know what they are as well so we can pass it along. Like, this is what you want a church to do. That's how they should handle it. But it's just telling that this sort of thing is happening even at the church of the guy who is now in charge of the SBC. Like, it is amazing to me that this is where the Southern Baptists are at. And while their church is on fire dealing with sexual abuse, what got the most headlines? They voted against IVF. They decided women cannot be leaders, but they just didn't have enough votes to make it a law. It's just that a majority of them think women are not allowed to be pastors. That's where their mind is at. I don't know, man. That's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic at this point, because I don't know how any of this makes young people think I got to join up with this group. So that was the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting, a disturbing gathering, but an influential one. This is going to guide what millions and millions of Christians hear over the next year, and none of it is good. None of it is loving. All of it is very cruel and completely unnecessary. I'm going to pause there. I'll take some questions before we get to the next story. I promise that was the biggest one here. The outcome of their conference may be dismal, yet I feel strangely safe and peaceful while they're all in one spot and it's nowhere near me. Right on, man. They were in what was it? Indianapolis, I think. That's where they were. Mike Pence gave a speech to the crowd and they loved it. They love their Mike Pence, and yet somehow they're all going to vote for Trump. Don't know how that works. Baptists always need something to be against. Hate is what brings them together. Abortion, IVF. Yeah, I mean, if it's not gay people on the menu, then it's going to be women trying to exercise some rights or express some measure of authority, right? It's always about which group they don't like the most. Like, I'm surprised they didn't do more against trans people this time around. Maybe because they had to deal with women first. Half of all embryos naturally fail to implant. A fourth of known pregnancies end in miscarriage. Their God is the most prolific abortionist in existence. But yeah, it's the IVF doctors who are the problem. No kidding. I assume those stats are correct. But yeah, like that's the thing. Anyone who's done IVF, there's a reason your doctor may take several eggs at the beginning, because a lot of these embryos are not going to implant, because a lot of these embryos won't develop even when they are implanted. So you need options. And instead of doing like 10 different surgeries, it's a lot easier to do one surgery, get all the eggs you need, and then use them as you need to in the future. But I don't know, all the anti-abortion crowd has suddenly decided that, you know what? Freezing an embryo, that counts as murder, because if you don't use it, you will have to destroy it. And I don't know what the option is. The option is it's going to be harder and harder to get IVF if you're in a red state. And doctors who do it in red states will probably be prosecuted before long. Give it time. It'll happen. It seems politically strategic. Adopting extreme positions will bring in people who left other churches over disagreements with social issues and people who want justification for being hateful. I do get what you were saying there, but what's surprising to me is, like, if you're looking for a conservative Christian church to join, the Southern Baptists were already there. No one was accusing Southern Baptists of being liberal. So, yeah, this might attract the more extreme base, but I feel like they already got that crowd. No one else was like fighting for them. But I think what this will do is push out more people who just can't get on board with this stuff. And like the net result is going to be you're going to lose more people than you gain. That's why I'm surprised by this. Because, like, if it was a strategic move, I could at least get where they're coming from. But this seems like it's going to backfire when it comes to membership. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. But I don't know how this works in the long run. Wilhelmit covered the 2x2s in California. They're a cult that has allegations of child sexual abuse. Fritz, you're going to have to email me that information. I don't think I know enough about that to say more about it. Um, but I'm interested. Send it over to me. Yeah, thank you for being here. Please like and subscribe. And if you go to this website right here, you will have access to my articles, including one I'm hoping I can get up by tomorrow, which I think you will enjoy. It's frivolous and lighthearted, and it's bonkers. And I'm not quite ready to share it on this show just yet. Um, but I am going to get to another story in just a second here. Let me close out the first batch of tabs right here. And again, please leave your comments and questions and donate if you can. Okay. We have a cool den. We have the Friendly Atheist Convention. This is news to me, but I approve. Friday, June 28th on Discord. And if you need that link, it'll be in the sidebar here in the comment thread. Go there. You could join the Friendly Atheist Discord where more information will be shared. And basically, what is that going to be? I think it's just a gathering online of people. I will not be there. I will be fluttering around somewhere else. But you all can get together and meet at our weekly church time without me. And then we'll take charge right there. Thank you for that. All right, let's get to this next story. This one was sad, but it's a real thing that happened. There was a woman in Texas who recently attempted to go to church. She wanted to go to church. She went. And then when she got there, they kicked her out. Why did they kick her out of church? Why did they kick her out of church? And the answer, I'm going to show you in a second here, is that, well, she's blind. This woman's name is Marie. I'm going to show you her picture because she ended up speaking to the local news about this. Marie went to church with her service dog to attend a church service, and then they kicked her out because of her service dog, which is horrible. And I want to show you this right here. This is an article from the local news station in Texas. I had somebody say to me on Sunday, well, I'm not denying you, I'm denying your service animal. Well, by extension, you are denying me because Betty and I are a cohesive unit. Her dog's name is Betty. And later on, she said, there was just this feeling of being turned away, this feeling of embarrassment, this feeling of being excluded from something, Marie said. Or Mari said. So basically, a blind woman and her seeing eye dog, her service animal, went to church and then they kicked her out for bringing her dog. And when the reporter, I'm not going to name her because I don't want people to be annoyed at her, but when the reporter for this news outlet did the segment on this church and of Marie, she did not name the church. And the reporter explained her decision by saying, turns out the organization did not break any laws, which is true because some of you may be thinking of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which says service animals are allowed in public places. But of course, churches are not public. They don't have to play by those rules. And the church is legally within its rights to tell Ramos to get out. I mean, they can do that with gay people. They can do that with trans people. They could do that with people of color if they wanted to, and everyone else they feel are beneath them. And in this case, they kicked out this blind woman and her service dog. But I'm saying, like, just because they're legally allowed to do it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, of course, right? And according to Ramos, they asked her in this news segment, like, so what did they say to you? Did they just say we're kicking you out because it's a dog? And no, the answer was someone at the church said, we have a live band for our worship services, and there are also flashing lights. And those would not be, quote, appropriate for a service animal. And okay, I get where they're coming from, but like, why are you making that decision on her behalf? Why not tell her you should know your church service has music and flashing lights? And is your dog going to be okay with that? And if she says yes, because she knows her service dog better than they do, then let her in. I mean, service dogs are trained to deal with this type of stuff. They're trained to deal with distractions like that. You know, if service dogs can guide blind people through traffic and crowded places I feel like they can handle loud noises and bright lights. But if they can't, let her make that decision. Don't make it for her. And it's kind of frustrating that the news outlet did this story without naming the church because it lets the church get away with this sort of behavior. But I think that's also a reminder that, like in so many situations, the government, as soulless, as heartless as people like to make it out to be, sometimes it's the government that's on the forefront of these issues. The government is more moral and ethical, while churches only pretend to be. And this is a perfect example. Like when it comes to public policy, the government's job is to set bare minimum limits. Like you got to do the bare minimum here, but hopefully different groups go above and beyond. Like if the government says the federal minimum wage is 7.25 an hour, that doesn't mean you're supposed to give 7.25 an hour, but you would go lower if you could. No, it means that's the bare minimum, but hopefully you're given a lot more, 15, 20 bucks an hour, because that's what a good company would do. And here's a perfect example. The Americans with Disabilities Act says public places have to accommodate service pets. And here's a church saying, we don't have to, so we're going to be cruel and we're going to kick this woman out. Like, leave it to a church to look at public accommodations and think, we can do worse. And it's not even the first time this has happened. There was an article in 2019. Check this out. This is in South Carolina. Totally humiliated. Blind man and service dog turned away from South Carolina church. And that guy was a veteran. And they told him, that church told this guy, we can't let dogs into our church because of safety. Here's a story that's even worse. And I remember this, even though it happened like 13 years ago. Check this out. This is from a local news station as well. This girl was diabetic. This is in 2012. This girl was in 5th grade. She attended a private Christian elementary school in Oregon, and the school said, well, you can't bring your dog in here because it's distracting or it'll make a mess in the building. Check this out. She and her mom, Debbie, recently asked her school permission to bring the service animal to class, thinking they were covered under the ADA, which, again, like I said, they're not. And the school said no. School administrators worried other kids might suffer from pet allergies, classmates would be too distracted, or Bassie, the dog, would simply make a mess in the school building, which, again, these are service dogs. They are literally trained to not do these things that some random dog would do. So, I mean, just unnecessary cruelty, right? We are always told these stories of how Jesus healed the blind. Well, these Christians kick them out. I mean, the service dogs were doing more to help these people with disabilities than the church staffers were. I guess if there's a silver lining to this story, it's that this woman found out the church is a horrible place, like right up front. Because a lot of people, including people watching this video, you might attend a church for many years before you realize what a horrible place it is. So I'm glad she found out early. By the way, in case you're wondering what church this was, I will tell you, I think I know which one it is. I looked it up. I found reasonable evidence to tell you I know which one it is. However, I wanted confirmation, right? And I reached out to everyone I could think of involved in this story, involving this woman. I reached out to the church. I reached out to friends of this woman. Like, someone tell me what church this was. Is it this church? I think it's this church. And no one would confirm this for me. And so as far as I could tell, they haven't outed the church yet. And I'm not going to here because, again, I'm not going to say it unless I know for sure. But again, it is frustrating, right? That this church does something horrible, but because they didn't break the law, they're probably going to get away with it, which I find very frustrating. I will stop there for now. We'll take questions. Service animal does not equal emotional support animal, but I guess they never got the memo. Yeah, service animals are trained to literally deal with, I think, like, right, loud noises, things like that, to be non-problematic in these public spaces and stuff like that. I don't know what the emotional support animals are trained, how they operate. I don't know enough. Why am I talking? Let me get to the next one. I bet they let guns in their churches. They have problems with service animals? Fair point. Fair point. Yeah, go sign up. You can do it. Let me pull up this. I got a clip coming up here I think you're going to want to see. Um, I'm going to whip through a couple of these. Okay, let's talk about this. You may have seen this on Facebook or X/Twitter, but late last week, a handful of doctors associated with the American College of Pediatricians, remember that, ACP, American College of Pediatricians, they issued a statement urging healthcare professionals to stop offering gender affirming care to minors. And they even created a website for this. And I'm going to show you this website, Doctors Protecting Children Declaration. And it looks very fancy here. Like, given everything we know, basically saying, let's not help kids who are trans. I mean, they have pictures of doctors wearing the coats and doing this. And they have a declaration, sex is dimorphic and gender ideology. That's bad. And medical decisions should not be based on what someone wants, but on whatever the birth certificate says. Whatever. We recognize. Okay, so they said all this crap, but they also held a press conference, which is kind of interesting. Before I show you the clip of this, do you remember when COVID was happening outside the Capitol? There was a small group of doctors. I don't remember timeline wise when this was. I can't remember if this is like when vaccines were ready for COVID or when people were told to wear masks. But at some point, a handful of doctors stood outside of microphones outside the Capitol and basically said, you know what Fauci is telling you? Do not do anything he says. We know what we're talking about because we are doctors. We're wearing the white coats. Don't do it. They were called like the frontline doctors. And now one of those people is like the Surgeon General in Florida because Ron DeSantis is like, how can I hurt more people? This is what this press conference was. You had all these handful of doctors. They showed up and they basically said exactly what I told you about. Let's not help trans people. Oh, yeah, I think a commenter mentioned this. They were also promoting ivermectin as a cure for COVID, which it is not. Just bad medical advice. You would not want to listen to these doctors. But for the conspiracy theorists out there and the people who vote Republican, it's like, see, yeah, these are doctors saying this thing, which, okay, you get, if you look the part and you sound like you know what you're talking about, there's a lot of people who will believe anything you say. I'm going to show you a clip of this press conference. And mind you, there were multiple people who spoke at this thing. I'm just going to show you one of them. Let me play this for you and then I will talk. And I should also tell you, this woman spoke for like 4 minutes. You could tell where I edited this just for the sake of time so you could get a glimpse of her whole speech, but I'm not going to play the whole thing.
And we have serious concerns about the physical and mental health effects of the current protocols promoted for the care of children and adolescents in the United States who express discomfort with their biological sex. So we are calling on these medical organizations of the United States and immediately stop the promotion of social affirmation, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for children and adolescents who experience distress over their biological sex. In our declaration, we affirm that sex is a dimorphic, innate trait defined in relation to an organism's biological role in reproduction, male and female. Medical decision-making should be based upon an individual's biological sex. It should respect biological reality and the dignity of the person by compassionately addressing the whole person. We are here defying the claims made by these medical organizations in the US that those of us who are concerned are a minority and that their protocols are consensus. They are not consensus, and we are speaking in a loud, unified voice, enough.
Okay, as I'm sure many of you watching this are thinking to yourself, like, what the hell is she talking about? None of that is accurate. But here's the thing. They look the part. She had her doctor uniform. I'm not denying she's a doctor, but like she's playing the part. She's looking the part. Notice you have no idea who's in the audience there because they don't need it because they're just trying to put on a show for you. And the whole thing is, we are doctors. We're telling you that everything that feeds into your right-wing anti-trans conspiracy theories is true, and we're the smart ones because we're doctors. And if they do that, they can trick dumb people into thinking they have a point. And it worked, because guess who started spreading this stuff? Well, you had Elon Musk, who responded with, wow. Notice what he's retweeting there. The American College of Pediatricians just put out this fire statement calling out all the major medical associations by name for pushing the gender transition craze on kids. And Elon spreads it. There was an organization called the Catholic News Agencies. This was their headline. Doctors urge U.S. medical groups to immediately stop trans treatments on children. But the one I really wanted to show you, guess who fell for this as well? Look at this. Look at this. The guy who publishes Skeptic magazine, who fell for this hook, line, and sinker. Here is the full statement from the American College of Pediatricians affirming the science. And Shermer would know because he's a very skeptical person who knows how to weed through BS. Of course, he promoted this. So you have all these morons promoting what this lady said. And here's the thing you need to know about the American College of Pediatricians. This is not a legitimate organization representing the field of pediatrics. Do you know how there's a group called 1 Million Moms that's like, there's a commercial with gay people. It's going to hurt our children. And the thing is, they don't have 1 million members. It's like one mom who just pretends like she's speaking on behalf of all moms. That's what the American College of Pediatricians is. It's a small group of doctors. Let's assume they are legit doctors, but it's a small group of doctors who say they speak for everybody, even though they do not. It's like the Flat Earth Society compared to geologists, okay? This group, the American College of Pediatricians, if you want to become a member and you go to their website and you want to like say, I want to be a part of this, they require you to accept a certain set of ideologies. What are those ideologies? Well, you have to support abstinence-only sex education. You have to oppose same-sex marriage. You have to reject vaccine mandates. You have to link homosexuality with pedophilia, or at least that is something they have said on their website. They have supported gay conversion therapy. They claim trans identities are a mental illness. And the Southern Poverty Law Center has called them a hate group. And even if you're not a fan of the Southern Poverty Law Center, their website, when they say this is a hate group, it lists the receipts. It shows the things they have said that are not based in science. Last year, by the way, was it 2022? 2022, Wired Magazine got a copy of their internal documents. And they wrote an article saying, here's what we found from all these documents online. I think they got access to like their Google servers, like their Google Docs online, and they were able to sift through them. And I want to show you something that was in Wired because this was interesting. One spreadsheet appears to be an export of an internal database containing information on 1,200 past and current members. It contains intimate personal information about each member, including various contact details, where they were educated, how they heard of the group, and when membership dues were paid. I mean, if you're a member of this group, you probably don't want that leaking, but this is interesting. The records show past and current members are mostly male and on average 50. And as of spring 2022, the college counted slightly more than 700 members. 700 members. Interesting thing about that, 700 members. Is there a group that actually represents pediatricians? Yes, there is. It's called the American Association of Pediatrics. Here's their website. Like, this place is legit. And guess how many members they have? They have 67,000 members. Not 700. No, they have 67,000 members. And they actually do science and put out like statements. And they say all the stuff you would expect sensible doctors to say, such as do the responsible thing, get vaccinated, wear a mask. It's the healthier thing to do. And the thing, so what's going on with the ACP, the fake one? They decided about 2 decades ago, let's just imitate the American Academy of Pediatrics. We'll get a name that confuses people. We'll get a website that looks professional, and we'll just mimic them and then tell people, well, these are our recommendations. And then dumb people will fall for it. And we could tell them, you know what's a problem? Gay people. And some reporter will be like, doctors say gay people are bad. And they have done this when it comes to abortion and obviously trans issues. And if anything, they were at the very least trying to piggyback on the credibility of the legitimate AAP, trying to piggyback, because let's say we're talking about vaccine mandates. Well, a reporter is going to say, what is the American Academy of Pediatrics, the legit group, what do they have to say about vaccines? And then dumb reporters will be like, you know what I need? I need the opposing viewpoint because both sides matter. And who are they going to go to for both sides? Well, here's another group of pediatricians. Let me ask them what they think, which is the dumbest possible thing to do, because why would you go to a group of like automatic contrarians who don't care about science because they care about ideology? But that's the whole point. The point is to confuse people, even though there are not two scientifically valid positions on certain issues. And because the fake ACP looks the part and has a logo and wears professional doctor jackets when they do things, the dumb people fall for it. And I want to give you one more example of why this sham group, they put out like a report last year trying to show everyone, here's how successful we are. Here's our year-end report. And I want to show you this one thing. Look at this. We protect children from the harms of transgender ideology. But look at this in the upper right here. Our presence in the news media and social media has expanded exponentially. This is how they're measuring success. It's by how many views they got on social media and how many social media followers they have. By the way, I have more of those on both counts, and I'm not an organization of anything. But like, you would think, oh, what's the metric on how useful you are, on how good you are as an organization for pediatricians? And you would think they would measure like how many kids' lives have we saved? How many doctors, how many scientific journals have we been published in? That's how like legit groups might rate their success. These guys are like, look how many Facebook likes we got. Elon tweeted us or retweeted us, so we're going to count that as a win. Now give us money so we can lie to people. Like, that's not how you measure success at all. Like, all of that's to say no one should be paying any attention to what a conservative hate group that only cares about ideology, not science, not medicine, says about transgender people. In case you are wondering, notice I have not talked about the substance of anything they said, but I did want to give you some perspective on that too, because like, I know there are some atheists and whatnot who are like, well, maybe they kind of have a point. We should not do anything gender affirming for children. Scientific American, which I know is not a journal, but they do write about science, they actually analyzed this and wrote up a thing about this a couple years ago. And I thought this was a pretty useful summary of what the science actually says about this stuff. And I want to read this because this is important. The truth is that data from more than a dozen studies of more than 30,000 trans and gender diverse young people consistently show that access to gender-affirming care is associated with better mental health outcomes, and that the lack of access to such care is associated with higher rates of suicidality, depression, and self-harming behavior. And look at this too. Major medical organizations, including the legit American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the Endocrine Society, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Psychiatric Association, have published policy statements and guidelines on how to provide age-appropriate gender-affirming care. All of those medical societies find such care to be evidence-based and medically necessary. Oh, but like 10 doctors wearing lab coats went and said, we're doing a press conference, and they said, all of those people are wrong. To believe that is to say, well, I heard a climate denier was a scientist, so maybe climate change is a hoax. It's like, who cares what one idiot says? Why don't you listen to what like 99% of the people who study this stuff all the time say? Because maybe they have a better handle on this stuff. Meanwhile, Michael Shermer, of all people, is spreading this BS like it's legit because he also only cares about ideology, not science. By the way, after I posted about this myself, I'm not taking credit for this, but like shortly after, he issued another tweet. I don't have it in front of me, where he's like, all right, I heard all you people. I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it appears this is some right-wing group. However, everything they said was still correct. It's like, yeah, you're not doing skepticism. I don't know why anyone's listening to him either. Like, listening to this fake medical group, that's like going to a Catholic priest to ask for sex advice. Why would you do that? They don't know what they're talking about. Why are you trying to get advice from people who are extremely ignorant about the subject? By the way, the dude that I want to show you that Elon tweet one more time. This tweet that he was sharing by Robbie Starbuck, who said, "Oh my God, look at this video that happened." Who is Robbie Starbuck? He is a guy. He's an anti-trans activist who just came out with a movie about anti-trans stuff not that long ago. He's like promoting an anti-trans movie. So of course he's promoting the BS people promoting anti-trans propaganda. And in that movie that he made, he literally lied to participants to secure their involvement and then edited their statements in deceptive ways. And the people he spoke to have already spoken out against it. So like even the guy they're all quote tweeting here is not a fair assessor of what's going on. You would think that would raise some red flags. I'm just saying, with the founder of Skeptic Magazine. But apparently I am wrong. All right, I'll pause there. What do we got? What do we got here? What questions? Trans people are people. We all have the right to medical treatment. Yeah, and the thing, obviously, you are right, Keith. The thing that boggles my mind is like, it's not like a child can walk into a doctor's office and say, like, I feel like I'm the opposite gender or something like that. So let's change my entire body. I want hormones now. I want you to perform surgery on me. That's not how it works. The gender affirming care we're talking about is give the child space to explore this stuff in ways that will help them understand it. It's not something that's going to happen like that. Like, and also, I trust what the medical experts say, not people who just wear lab coats and don't follow the science. So maybe the people who actually work with kids and study this and work with the medical associations that do all this stuff, maybe they know more about the subject than like random guy on Twitter who just wants to feed the conspiracy theories and fuel rage. I'm surprised by how many atheists fall for this stuff. It's disappointing, but like all those right-wing atheists, this is what they do as well. Dr. Jill. Yep, that's the lady in the lab coat. She's the executive director, by the way, of that fake group. This is an excellent point. Dr. Jill has that fundy voice. The one that says, you should listen to me, but I'm condescending toward you. It's the Katie Britt voice. Yes. Thank you for that. Listening to this as an intersex person is wild. I'm sorry, Moss Eater. I was told by Lady in Lab Coat that you don't exist. Sorry. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, living proof that, like, maybe gender spectrum, maybe it's a little more complicated than some people might think. It's like, sorry, I'm just going to pretend you're not there. There's just two, and they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. And the doctor decides it when you're half a second old, and that's the end of the story. It doesn't get more complicated. I'm a scientist. I love nuance. It always makes me laugh when, like, science, I'm thinking of like Jerry Coyne, all those right-wing conservative atheists and scientists, when all of them say similar things, it's like, these are people who, if you did like a 2x2 Punnett square, like you learned in your high school biology class, if you get to college or you study biology later on, one of the things you learn is, well, that's overly simplified. That is so not how our genes interact and work. It's way more complicated than that. And yet when you ask them about gender, it's like, nope, it's binary. We're done with this now. It's like, really? We're done studying this thing? Because I don't know, you would think they would be more amenable to studying nuance, but no. Cherry pick doctors with an agenda. That's what their name should be. That's what the organization's name should be. I really don't understand why people put so much effort into hating things they know little to nothing about. I don't know either, but it fuels the entire right wing everything. It's grievance. Some people like to be mad. Some people like to be contrarian. It doesn't matter how much you know about it. They just know, oh, liberals say this. We got to be on the other side of it. Like they're just reflexively against anything that is deemed woke, And it doesn't matter how correct that side may be. They're just like, well, if liberals like it, I must hate it. And I'm going to make everyone's life miserable because I think this is one of the reasons I don't know if it's a fair comparison to say this anti-trans group is like the flat earth society, but like, why do people genuinely believe the earth is flat? Some of it's just plain old ignorance. But I think for some people, if you're in that subculture, you feel like you are right about something everyone else doesn't get. And for once in your life, you think you're the smart one. And like you probably don't get that feeling anywhere else in your life. And I think that's the case for this stuff. If you talk about who's most anti-trans, it's these right-wing assholes who are just never the smart people. They're never the ones everyone looks to and say, that's the intelligent guy. No one said that about like Ben Shapiro. Like, you know what I like about him? He's intelligent. No, they just make fun of him because he's a moron. But if you're in that bubble and you never get called the smart one, it's like, you know what? When it comes to this particular grievance, I'm right and everyone else is wrong. And I'm willing to look past what the left is telling you. Like they feel like they're smart. I think that's a big part of it. The fake association disregards the mental aspect. You know what? I don't know what that is talking about. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I may need a little more to make sense of that. Was there anything else for this? Oh, we are going to get more for this one. Yeah, I was surprised by how viral that video went with that lady in the lab coat. And it's also telling who's spreading that video because there's a lot of conservative atheists who are spreading that thing. It's like you guys didn't even do the bare minimum of research. Oh, the fake doctor association, you were saying, disregards the mental aspect. Nope, I still don't know what we're talking about. What is the fake doctor association thinking about? I'm going to skip this question. We'll come back to it later or something. Yeah, I think this is a fair assessment of this. The Ben Shapiro is a stupid person's idea of a smart person. Yeah, like Donald Trump is a poor person's idea of a rich person. Like actually rich people don't spend money or do anything like Donald Trump by and large because like they make fun of him. But if you're poor and you're like, what would you do if you had $1 billion? And the poor people would say like, well, I would buy a mansion with gold toilets. And it's like, yeah, that's why you think Donald Trump is like smart and wealthy or something. Was there anything else for this story? Up some tabs here and then we'll do the next story in just a second. Oh, I'm excited about this one. I think you'll be very interested in this one. This one has a twist ending to it. All right, I'm going to get to this next story. There was a pastor in Kansas recently, and he decided to celebrate Pride by basically going to the local library and checking out all the LGBTQ books. And then he told members of his church to do the same thing because, in his mind, if they check out all the gay books, the books about gay people, trans people, kids won't get access to them. And let me show you what this man posted on Instagram right here. All right. Here's the pastor, Kyle Lamott. Here he is with his bags and bags of books. We'll come back to that picture in a second. It's Pride Month, a good time to recalibrate what it means to love your neighbors. One way you can love your neighbors and your community is to gather some of the men in your church and go empty the local library of all their LGBTQ plus books. Start with the kids' books and work your way up. This really is a great way to love your neighbors and serve your community. Okay, So they want to check out all the LGBTQ plus books. But like, do you know how long I looked at this picture? Let's look at this picture for a second. Let's zoom in here. I don't know this book, Transitions, but you could see it has a rainbow on it. All right, fine. But a couple things. Look at the size of these books. These are not children's books. They can't all be children's books. Some of those look really big. So they're not going after children's books, right? What else is here? If you look at this list, and I'm trying to zoom in, look at look at the top of the screen right now. That's a Deepak Chopra book. First of all, you can keep that one. No one wants it. But also, Deepak Chopra has many flaws, but I don't think he's written a book about like gay people or trans people. Like, why is that in the mix? I don't get it. What else is in here? You can tell me if you notice anything. Some of these books I get have something to do with LGBTQ people, but not all of them. What else is in here? I think there was a book about Black Lives Matter somewhere. Maybe I missed it as I'm zooming in. There was a book about Billie Jean King, the tennis icon. But again, they're just picking random books here. None of this has anything to do with kids' books or anything like that. Also, what's with that subtle dose of misogyny in that post? That guy said, gather together some of the men in your church and go empty the local library of these books. Like, why men? Do you not think women are capable of checking out books? Like, what if women folk get near literature? Oh no, they might start learning and educating themselves, and then churches like this will be screwed. Is that what you think is going to happen? So that's weird. But again, okay, what is the point of all this? The point of all this is obviously they just don't want anyone to get their hands on these books. I'm going to go ahead and show this right now. I'm going to speculate. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not the one I wanted to show. This one right here, because it's not about the kids. It's about the hate. I mean, that is my take on it for sure. And I'll come back to that point in just a second. But I have to wonder, I was thinking so long about the strategy employed here. Like, if you wanted to, if they said, and they didn't say this, but if they said, let's get these books from the library and burn them so no one can read them, I would say, well, that's stupid because there are other copies of the book. But also, okay, you want to destroy the books. But the whole point of a library is that people can check out books. Like, that's why they exist. If a book is unavailable, what do I do if I want a book from the library? Well, I can reserve it. I can check it out like a week or two later when it comes back to the library. So this act of pretend heroism, it wasn't preventing anyone from reading any of these books. At best, it just delayed it by like a couple of weeks. And it's also important to realize that a book doesn't have to have a rainbow on it to include LGBTQ characters or situations. This guy was literally judging books by their covers or taking whatever was on the Pride display and maybe whatever books were next to it, because I don't think the Deepak Chopra book would be on there. I don't get it. What I found hilarious, though, about all of this is that guess who was dunking on this pastor? The Wichita Public Library and a local news reporter. They all dunked on this guy. Here's what I mean. The local NPR station, they did an article about this. Here's what they said. The librarian at this place and other area librarians said the protest strategy likely would backfire because checkouts are an indication of demand for certain materials. Libraries track demand as they replenish their collections. When there's a high demand and usage of books, those are the ones we want to keep and even replace if they get damaged or not returned. If the strategy is to get them away from kids, in the short term it would work, but in the long run, we'd be more likely to buy those titles because of the usage. So because this pastor checked out all these books and got all of his buddies to check out these books, there's a good chance the library is going to just order more because they're so popular. Even the Wichita, Kansas, not exactly the most liberal place, right? The Wichita Public Library System said the same thing. Happy Pride Month to those who celebrate. We learned that a local religious leader is emptying libraries of LGBTQIA plus books as a form of protest. Remember, your library's collections reflect your community, and when books are checked out and not stolen, that's so wrong, the data justifies that we should buy more to meet community interests. So all these people are mocking this pastor, right? They're having a field day with this guy. And the story, like the stunt didn't even work on its own merits because, and I found this amusing too. One of the things that the library said, the Wichita Public Library, uh, they said on to a reporter, they have not noticed an unusual uptick in checkouts at Wichita branches. So had the priest, had the pastor not posted on Instagram, had this not been a story, the Wichita Public Libraries wouldn't have even noticed people were checking out more LGBTQ books, which to me sounds like a guy like making love to a woman and the woman going like, "Wait, that's it? That's all you got?" Like, what an insult from the library. Like, yeah, we didn't notice. This guy didn't do anything. Hilarious. When the library is dunking on you, you know it's bad. Okay, so here's what happened since then. Because I saw this story, I was, I thought it was hilarious, but then I got to wondering, like the NPR story. At the time I read it, they didn't have any quotation from the pastor. I think they didn't give him much time to respond, so he didn't have a statement. So I reached out to the pastor, mostly because I'm like, you understand this is a dumb idea, right? You know this is not going to work. I'm trying to figure out what's your mindset? What's the strategy you're going with here? Because you have to know this is not going to do whatever it is you think it's going to do. I mean, yes, it's a hateful thing to do to begin with, but also from your perspective, it's not going to work. That's okay. So I reached out to the dude, and to my surprise, he wrote back and he agreed to talk to me. So over the course of a few phone calls, and text messages and emails, we had a long conversation, a couple of them, about what he was trying to do. And some of it I promised him I would keep off the record, and uh, I will honor that. But here's what he told me on the record, okay? He said he wanted to clarify right away. He knew that checking out these books would not stop kids from reading them or other people from reading the books. He knew this was temporary. So he knew he wasn't going to stop anyone from reading these books. That's number one. Number two, he told me he's not going to like steal the books. He's not going to burn the books. He is going to return them before their due date. So he wanted everyone to know that as well. He also told me his family has been harassed and doxxed, which obviously unacceptable. I don't condone any of that, and don't go harassing this dude. That's why he privatized or whatever the word is, his Instagram account. That post I showed you, you can't find it right now because he had to lock down his Instagram account because people were harassing him. And he says, yeah, there was criticism on his post as well when people heard about the story, but it went beyond criticism. It went beyond the pale. Okay, so I understand that. What he wanted, I did ask him questions though, because I did want answers. So my first question was like, you knew this was going to backfire, right? Because this is a dumb idea. He said, and he understood that the library may buy more LGBTQ books in response. He told me, I don't think the plan backfired at all. No, the truth is, I rarely check Instagram, and he shut it down. His argument was like, whatever the library does in response to this, they were going to do anyway, or whatever books the library was going to purchase. He's not on the library board. They have their own ways of doing things, their reasons for doing things. So he wasn't concerned about how they were going to respond to him. So he was aware that they're going to do what they're going to do. So he didn't think this was going to backfire. I think he's just covering his butt. I think he didn't realize it would backfire like that, but okay. He also said the intention and goal were not to influence the library's future inventory. My concern lies elsewhere. Okay, so then I asked him straight up, what are your concerns? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think, in my head, I'm like, do you think a kid's going to read a book like a memoir, a graphic novel about a gay person, about a trans child who's growing up and dealing with all that? And do you think a kid's going to read that and say, I didn't know that. I must be trans? Or do you think they're going to read a book with a gay character, or like maybe a scene in a young adult novel where a boy kisses another boy? And do you think someone's going to read that and say, I'm going to try that. I might be gay? Like, that's not how it works. That's never how it works. A lot of the times, the reason those authors even wrote those books aimed at younger audiences about LGBTQ issues is because when they were younger, those books were not there and they were struggling. And now that they're older and they made it to adulthood, they're thinking, I think I can tell this story in a way that a younger version of me might have appreciated. So let me share this story. Maybe it helps people down the line. And like, that's what's actually going on here. So I asked this pastor, Lamont, like, what are your concerns? Why do you think these books are bad for kids? And he really didn't have an explanation, one, for all the books that he checked out. I was like, why'd you get a Deepak Chopra book? He didn't answer me. He didn't have a good answer for that. But he brought up books like Gender Queer, which I think is the most banned book in America right now, which is a popular graphic novel that he said normalizes gender identities. And he felt that some books were like too sexually explicit. But again, like, this is the library. It's not like it's a school assignment. It's a library. If someone wants to check it out, let them check it out. What about books, I said, that just have gay characters? Are you going after them too? What about books that give voice to the feelings that a lot of young people have when they are questioning their sexual orientation or don't feel like they are in the right body or something like that? All this stuff. Does he understand those concerns? And his answer, I'm going to show it to you here. He said, I don't have a problem with LGBTQ people. It's their ideology, which, as we learned in the last segment, that's like a very Shermer-esque thing to say. But let me show you what he said. I think there could be some misunderstanding here. My worry doesn't stem, where did it go? Doesn't stem from reading about LGBTQ issues or characters. No, it's about trying to love our community by helping protect the hearts and minds of children from an ideology that has an insidious appetite. Some will hear of this and interpret it as a personal or hateful act. Nothing could be further from the truth. To the contrary, I am convinced humanity is fully realized and flourishes in union with the incarnated Christ. The ideologies promoted in many of these books aimed at children is an ideology that dehumanizes. You know what dehumanizes people? Telling them they're all sinners from birth and that only Jesus will save them. Like, what the hell? They're showing kids that there's nothing wrong with them if they have a crush on someone of the same sex or if they feel like they're trapped in the wrong body. That is an act of love. That is not an act of hate. Like, in that way, these books can save lives. And this guy doesn't care about it, which is why he was trying to get these books out of those kids' hands. And furthermore, that sort of message of love is not one anyone in his church is ever going to hear, which means the kids in his church, the kids who go to conservative churches and who are taught to suppress who they are because of whatever the pastor says about the incarnated Christ, those kids are going to struggle even more because they don't have a loving person in their life. And these books may be the lifeline that they need. You don't show love by censoring these books, especially books that call for common decency and basic humanity, by helping readers, including, by the way, cis and straight readers, understand LGBTQ people a little better. I asked him straight up, the pastor, I'm like, what harm do these books cause? What ideology are you worried about? And he gave the same answer. It's like the ideology that says there's something wrong with the body God gave you, stuff like that. Like, it just didn't answer the question. I think if you believe children only have worth under Christ if they're cis and straight, which is what I took away from his answers, I think that means your religion is not teaching you to love people, and you should stop pretending otherwise. If you love children, you should want them to love themselves. And these books help them do that. And you know what doesn't help? Telling them that they're going to go to hell unless they change their very essence to fit some made up mold of Jesus. So then I thought, like, let me try one more question. What if it was December and there were a lot of books out about Christmas and the birth of Christ, and a bunch of atheists said, hey, gang, let's go to the library and check out all of these Christian books. Not because we have any interest in reading them, but just to stop Christians from getting them. I asked this guy, like, wouldn't you be upset about that? Wouldn't you say, like, look, these atheists are persecuting us, or they're mad at us, they hate us, like something like that? Right? Easy question. Just admit you're a hypocrite, right? And he said, as a Christian pastor, I happily affirm the principle of liberty in literary pursuits. If atheists wish to peruse all the Christian texts, let them. After all, the truth has a funny way of revealing itself regardless of one's intentions. Which I guess there's a point to that. I mean, first of all, nothing makes people atheists faster than reading Christian books and reading the Bible. But also, like, listen to what he said. I happily affirm the principle of liberty in literary pursuits. The whole reason we're even having this discussion is because he didn't want kids to check out books that he personally didn't like. What does he actually care about literary pursuits? He doesn't care about the principle of liberty. He's trying to censor and block people from getting the books they want to read. And I think that tells you a lot about the conservative Christian mindset, right? Instead of dealing with reality, there are some pastors who just want to shield people from ideas that may go against what their churches teach. Censorship is one of those tools. And I think there is this underlying belief. He didn't say this. This is me talking. I think he believes that if you never learn that trans people exist, and if you're not ever shown gay people in a positive light, no one will ever become gay or trans or bi or anything themselves. Like, and as anyone who is LGBTQ could tell you, that is not how it works. Kids who are gay or trans will continue to be gay or trans. Now, whether they can accept that and whether they make it into adulthood, that is an open question. And people like him don't want them to reach adulthood. Not being happy with who they are, that's for damn sure. And I mean, we see this approach when it comes to sex, for example. How many pastors say, we can't have you learning about it. No comprehensive sex education. We'll just teach you abstinence only, and we're going to shield you from ever learning about sex any other way. And of course, we know, scientifically, we know that doesn't work. People are going to have sex. The question is whether they're going to do it in a safe way or not. Same thing with like atheism. They don't want you learning about it. Same thing with evolution. Like they don't want you exposed to it because they think you'll believe it or understand it. Like, I guess the one thing I'll close with this. This guy currently, his church has a lot of books about gay people, including gay people, trans people. Like they're sitting there. You have them for a couple of weeks. Maybe open up a second book for once in your life. Open it up, read those books, maybe get some understanding. It'll be good for the people in your church because maybe if you read some of these books, you would realize they're really good. Not all of them, because some books suck no matter what they're about, but a lot of them are really good. And I'm lying. He actually did mention he read other books, just not these ones. He should. He should read these books. He has them. Okay. What other questions we got here? While we are getting those, what library lets you check out this many books at the same time? That is a fair question, Joe. I believe the Andover Public Library, where he got those books from in Kansas, they had a 50 book limit for checkout. So when he said, like, hey, get the men in your church, not the ladies, they don't allow them to check out books. No, but like if multiple men checked out books, then each of them could get a whole bunch. That's why he ended up with so many in his church, because I think him and a few of his buddies checked out all of those, not just one dude. I'm going to speculate they did not check the books out. False. They did check them out. Like they had their library card and everything. They will return the books before their due date, I was told. So I'll correct the record on that. They did it by the book. They didn't do anything illegal. They probably made a field trip group. That hall is probably the whole church's hall. Yeah, exactly. It's more non-biblical books than they've ever seen in their lives. Does that indicate he perused the LGBTQ books? I think he actually just went to the pride display at this local library and just shoveled it all in his bags. Him and the other men, they just stuffed them in their man purses and checked them out. Though I'm still wondering where he got the Chopra book from. I don't know. I am old now, but I wish I had access to trans education when I was a kid. No kidding. I mean, again, just what's the point of reading books of any kind? It's because they allow you to learn about things you might not know about, and they put you in someone else's shoes and they show you what someone else's life is like. Isn't that why we read books in the first place? To transport into another world. And I know that's like very idealistic and highfalutin, whatever, but like that's the whole point. You're supposed to read about people you may not understand. That's what makes a book really good. So, like, yeah, not only people who are LGBTQ, but people who are not. You can learn a lot by reading this stuff. If you're an adult, you may want to read some of those graphic novels aimed at a younger audience about LGBTQ people. One, because they're easy to read and they're really fast, but you do learn a lot from them. That would be nice for everyone too. Some education about it, just to normalize it. I live in Canada now, and they actually do that in schools. Seems to cut down on bullying, at least. Yeah, yeah. Exposure to different people, different ways of life, different ways of thinking. It's good. If you're stuck in your own bubble where you are told everyone else outside the bubble is like evil and sinners, and like sinners who are irredeemable, yeah, that's when you get into problems. That's why I'm not taking my kids to church ever. I don't want them learning that nonsense. I want them to learn about what religions teach because they should know that. But like, I'm not sincerely taking them to church for moral education because they're not going to get one there. Not to those types of churches anyway. The fake association just I just still don't know what that one's about. YouTube rejected my comment. Sorry, Dan. They are focusing on male female physical traits and roles rather than caring for the mental aspects of the trans person. Yeah, I mean, they're so inundated with like what's under someone's like clothing that they just forget like the trauma that may come with thinking you're in the wrong body, that you're not what everyone tells you you are. I mean, just understanding how hard that would be growing up. And I'm not pretending to be an expert on it at all, but yeah, isn't that understanding just worth your time, even if you think there's something sinful about it or whatever? Wouldn't you want to understand? All right. Yeah. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. I appreciate it. I got a couple more for you here and I'll close up shop. This one, uh, let me make sure I have this up here before I move on. Here we go. Okay. Oops. All right. I wanted to talk about this lawsuit. There are two Christian couples who are suing the state of Vermont because officials there said we cannot place foster children inside your homes because you will not treat them well. And they're saying that's religious discrimination. Okay. And here is the lawsuit they're filing here. And you could see at the top who are the plaintiffs. It's two couples, Brian and Caitlin Waddy, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Michael and Rebecca Gant. And they're basically suing these Vermont officials. It's a federal lawsuit. And what this is all about, they're saying, is like these couples are foster parents. They have taken in foster children in the past. As far as I can tell, there were never any issues with it. But recently, the Vermont Department for Children and Families revoked their foster care licenses because they said we're not accommodating trans kids or LGBTQ kids in any way. And what happened is that they were actually fine under the old system. But a couple of years ago, Vermont updated its policies to say anyone who wanted to be a foster parent had to be accepting of LGBTQ people. And what that means in practice is you have to affirm those kids by using their pronouns and allowing them to dress in accordance with their gender expression. Basic stuff. That does not mean, oh, your kid says, I don't want my private parts anymore and they have to get surgery. That's not what this is about. It's saying if we put someone in your care and they tell you they are gay, you can't tell them, no, you're not. Let's take you to a church so you can be exorcised. Like, no, you can't do that. You have to accept them for who they are. And the couple's attorneys at the right-wing hate group Alliance Defending Freedom, here's how they put it in response. They said, no, that's not religious bigotry. The couples expressed their religiously inspired and widely held belief that girls cannot become boys or vice versa, which again, that's not what being trans is. That's not how it works. So that's just a straight up lie. So that's why they're suing. The state updated its policies. They don't like the policies. There you go. So here's the thing. Vermont's policies, they are sound. If children placed in the care of these couples happen to be trans, their homes would not be a safe place for those children to live. Or to put that another way, the state didn't reject these couples because they are Christian. They rejected the couples because they are bigots. Christianity is just the excuse they are using to justify their bigotry. That's what's going on here. And it is the state's obligation to make sure children in the foster care system, who already probably have a ton of stuff they are dealing with, you have to place them with families that will love and care for them unconditionally. And listen, that is a hard thing to do. I have so much respect for couples who adopt and take in foster children because it's so not easy. It's not easy with biological children, but it's really hard when it comes to fostering and adoption and all that stuff. And these parents are coming out and saying, yeah, but we can't help certain kids. Well, fine, but then you don't get to be on the list. It's not complicated. Here's the specifics of the lawsuit here, okay? Check this out. This is in the lawsuit that the couples filed. Look at number 188. They said a person from Vermont's department came to their home to do the assessment. Following the visit, the Waddies were asked to complete a form asking them to rate on a scale from 1 to 5 whether they felt equipped to care for children with certain characteristics. One of the statements read, "My family would be accepting and supportive of an LGBTQ foster child." The Waddies chose a 3. They felt they were a 5 in terms of loving and supporting any child, regardless of the policies, but they did not write 5 for fear that the department would interpret it to mean they would support anything a child said or believed about their sexual or gender identity. So they're like openly admitting, yeah, I mean, we love kids, but not in that situation, which seems like kind of a giveaway, right? There was another thing in the uh, same section, which I found interesting. This is the same couple here. Katie responded that while she and her husband considered themselves a 5, she realized that some people might mischaracterize their religious views as not sufficiently accepting. Yeah, because that's true. But look at this. Katie went on to share her personal experience with same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria, and how she was thankful her family did not treat her like the opposite sex because she eventually grew out of her discomfort. I have so many questions about this single statement. Like, okay, she liked other girls. What does that mean exactly? Was she in relationships with them? Did she like one day have a crush? Because you can have a crush on another woman and not be a lesbian. Maybe she's bisexual. Maybe she can't admit that to herself. I don't know. But this other one, she's like, I used to have gender dysphoria. What does that mean? Does that mean one day, like when you were a kid, you put on a baseball cap backwards and you played in the mud and you had a good time with your friends? Because, like, if you're a proverbial tomboy, that's not what we're talking about here. And that's what I want to know. Like, she says, listen, I used to be gay and I used to be trans and I grew out of it. So these kids can too. That's what she's getting at. It's like, I don't think you were either of those. And I wish I knew more because I've been thinking about this every day for the past week. Okay, so that's the first couple. That's what they're saying in their defense, as if all of this is good stuff. What about the other couple? Here's what they said. Uh, number 238 here. Murphy, who works with the state of Vermont, asked Brian a set of questions, including whether the Gants would take a child to a pride parade and whether the Gants would use a child's chosen name or stated pronouns. Brian answered these questions candidly. Again, these are his lawyers, Brian's lawyers, saying this. While they would love and support any child, they could not use pronouns, attend pride parades, or say or do anything to encourage a child to reject their biological sex and God-given identity. And then look at this. This gets even more specific. When Murphy asked Brian about gender-specific haircuts, like could a girl get short hair if she wanted to, Brian responded he was unsure how to answer. Foster parents are not permitted to change a child's hair without the biological parent's permission. Like Brian Murphy then told Brian he would begin the process of revoking their license. Like these people can't even just say like, yeah, the kid can get the haircut they want. I'm not going to say I support it. Like what the hell is going on here? So the bottom line is even if these two Christian couples are fine on paper in every other area, they are not okay in this particular area. And that is a deal breaker for the state of Vermont. That's kind of the end of the story. And I know some people are like really frustrated by that because there are always children who need homes, whether you got to adopt them or in the foster care system. Those kids need a place to go. And there are also these couples and parents who are saying, we will take them in. And you would think if you have this and you have this, why not put them together? But the state's obligation, you got to understand this, the state's obligation is to protect the kids, even if that means not placing them in someone else's custody, even when those people seem willing and claim they are able to do it. And how did Alliance Defending Freedom spin this? They're treating this like Vermont doesn't care about the kids. Vermont's foster care system is in crisis. There aren't enough families to care for vulnerable kids and children born with drug dependencies, have nowhere to call home. Yet Vermont is putting its ideological agenda ahead of the needs of these suffering kids, said an attorney for ADF. Like, no, the Vermont is not putting ideology ahead of everything else. These couples are putting ideology ahead of everything else. So, like, what the hell? And it's also very hard to take ADF seriously, this right-wing group, when they complain about, like, we have to care for the needs of the suffering. This is the same group responsible for the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe and the subsequent suffering of pregnant people throughout the country. They don't give a damn about who suffers as long as it's other people that they don't care about. Like, as long as their Christian-fueled hate takes precedence, they don't care who gets hurt. So ADF's lawsuit, it paints these couples as heroes, as sympathetic, like the men are pastors, and they just hold these traditional religious beliefs about human sexuality, which is their euphemism for being bigots and all this stuff. And I wanted to show you this too. Also in the lawsuit, look at this. For the Waddies and the Gants express these and other views in their homes and with their children. They want to do so. This is talking about Christianity. They want to do so in non-coercive ways, such as sharing their religious views that God created humans, male and female, over the dinner table, if their children are willing to hear them, which is a very weird thing to put in your own lawsuit, because, like, what they're saying is we totally want to proselytize to the kids who are placed in our care until they tell us they don't want to hear it, which puts the burden on the kids, these foster children, to tell these people who took them in, can you please shut up? Like a 12-year-old who's been through hell and back, who finally has a place to go now, is not going to tell the parents to just stop talking about Jesus. That's unfair to place on the kids. And these parents are like, we just want to preach. We just want to take these kids in and make them targets for our proselytizing. We don't give a shit what they want. But if they tell us no, we'll respect it. Well, one, it's not their job to tell you no, just don't do it. And second, like, aren't you basically admitting all you care about is preaching your religion and not interested in what the kids need or want? So anyway, this is why the state took away their licenses. Again, Vermont's not punishing them for Christianity because there's literally no evidence that Vermont is not placing kids in the home of Christian families. There's no religious discrimination in place here. These couples, even if they made the cut in the past, they don't make the cut anymore because the standards are higher and they're not good enough. That's the bottom line. I was reminded there are sometimes, like, there were cases going to the Supreme Court of like a white high school student who couldn't get into a college of her choice. And then she blamed affirmative action because she was just mediocre and didn't get in. It's like, yeah, you weren't good enough. That's why you didn't get in. Stop blaming everyone else because you're inadequate. Anyway, it's not just about LGBTQ things either. The lawsuit that they filed says things like, due to their Christian beliefs, Brian and Katie cannot say or do anything that contradicts their faith, which is a weird thing to say as well, because you know what a lot of fundamentalist Christian parents want to do? If their kids are acting up, they want to physically abuse them, right? Spare the rod, spoil the child. Well, what happens if Vermont says you can't beat your kids? I don't care if they're being punished for something. I don't care if you're trying to discipline them. No, you can't physically abuse them. Are these parents going to come back and say, like, well, it's my religion. You can't tell me no to that. Like, the point is, religion cannot be used as an immunity against bad behavior. Like, stop using your religion as an excuse to get away with things good parents would not get away with. Like, that's what this lawsuit does over and over. It praises the couples, tells you their qualifications, which no one's arguing about. They seem perfectly capable parents for kids who are not LGBTQ. And even then, like, I would argue, well, they're still not good parents, because even if you're cis and straight, you still don't want parents who have these feelings about LGBTQ people. But that's precisely why they should not be taking in foster kids currently in the state's care. The state has an obligation to respect anti-discrimination laws and protect LGBTQ kids, even if these Christian parents don't give a damn about them. Imagine this for a second. Imagine if the state placed trans children in the homes of these Christian parents, and then because of their bigotry, those children later committed self-harm. There would be an outcry against the state for knowingly placing those kids in harm's way in these Christian homes, in a home that was never going to accept them. And even if the odds of all that happening are very minimal, the government's job is to prevent that from ever happening in the first place. And if you know these couples are not going to accept trans children, then the state was right to reject their applications. It's not that complicated. It's not an attack on their faith. It's an attack on bigotry, which is exactly what you want the state to be doing. The couple doesn't care about the kids' best interests. They are selfish. They only care about their religion and nothing else. They can't accept the fact that they're just not good enough to do this job. It doesn't matter that they took in foster children in the past. They are not good enough anymore. And given how vulnerable these kids may be who come into their care, like even in the best of circumstances, you want more support, not less. Doesn't necessarily mean ADF is going to lose this case, though, because this is a federal lawsuit, which means it's going to hit federal judges. Some of them are Trump-appointed judges. That's possible. And if it ever got up to the Supreme Court, you know exactly how this would turn out. Like, so I don't know that this means they'll be able to get away with what they're doing. They might. If Vermont was actually discriminating against Christians, that would actually be an outrage. And church-state separation groups would fight against it. But that is not what is happening. These people are just pretending to be persecuted. And I think I appreciated this one statement from someone working with the state of Vermont's system here. In a statement, that person wrote, "It bears mentioning that ADF's lawsuit had been filed at the start of June, which is celebrated as the month of Pride. LGBTQI youth in foster care have higher than average rates of substance abuse, human trafficking, and suicide," she added, "and the state's policies are meant to help improve these outcomes. It is a human right for all to be valued and supported, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. The Family Services Division is here to serve all and upholds that expectation for both its staff as well as the foster parents who agree to take on the care of the youth in our custody." That is what a loving person says. And that is not what the Christian parents are saying. That is the point. That is the sort of love that the Waddies and the Gants do not understand, and no one at ADF understands. And they refuse to understand it because their Christian faith commands them to do the opposite. So I hope they lose this case. I hope Vermont wins. It would be better for the foster children, but this is not religious discrimination. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a bit, and I will take questions there. What do we got here? The whole foster care system needs to be reworked. It's a mess. I won't pretend to be an expert on it. I'll take your word that it needs to be reworked. I'm sure this is true of pretty much any government agency, right? Let's put more resources to help these government agencies. But one reason it doesn't get the resources and finances that it needs is usually because religious people, conservatives, Republicans, hate funding the government to do things like this. They would rather fund like private Christian ministries to do this work so they can be bigots. So yeah, I agree with you. The system probably does need a lot of help. You could say this about public schools too. What they need is more public funding, which is the one thing they're not going to get with Republicans in charge at the state level, at the federal level, or anything like that. As someone who wishes he could adopt a kid or two, fuck anyone who would refuse to affirm and support their adopted LGBTQ plus kid. Got nothing to add to that. I agree. Yeah, man, if you can adopt or take in foster kids, It's an incredible thing to do. I have some acquaintances who have done that. It takes a lot out of them, but man, those kids are so much better off when they are in loving homes, and those kids especially need them. You know what's funny about that? I'll tell you, go back to that for a second, Dan. Quick story here. Way back in the day, you may remember there's a group called Focus on the Family, Christian evangelical horrible organization. It was founded by James Dobson, who has no good advice for raising kids. But many, many years ago, he stepped down. He said, I'm basically retiring. And Focus on the Family brought in a new guy to lead the organization. And the question was, is this guy going to be as much of a culture warrior as James Dobson was throughout his life? And well, we didn't necessarily know. And that guy, the new guy, happened to be speaking at a church not far from where I live shortly after he got appointed. So I signed up for the free event and I'm like, I want to go listen to what this guy has to say. And the amazing thing was when Jim Daly is the guy's name, when he spoke at the time, I thought this is not bad because I think he said, I could be wrong here. I think he said something like he was adopted as a child. He never knew his parents. And the couple that took him in, maybe they were Christian. So he has a big spot in his heart for adoption and things like that. And one of the things I remember him saying is he wanted Focus on the Family to really go all in and use their resources to help Christian families take in more children, adoption, through foster care. And I thought for a second, I'm like, that sounds like a really good message. And even if these are proselytizing parents, like this idea that instead of fighting culture war battles, we should work on taking in children who need loving homes, like that would be really hard for me to condemn as an atheist. You know what I mean? And then, of course, it didn't last long because Focus on the Family under the new guy is still as bigoted as the old guy was. But for a second there, it's like if more Christians did the thing he was saying on like day one when he became president, like it would be really hard to criticize them because that's a really good thing to do. But of course, that's not what they put all their resources in doing. They are still fighting they're still spreading lies about gay kids and trans kids and all that stuff. There's also a widely held belief kids and other people should not get medical attention and just pray for them to get better. Yeah, I mean, this is the gay conversion therapy, right? Like, you don't need any help. You don't need any affirmation for sure. Just pray away the gay. If you pray, you won't be trans anymore, whatever it is. Like, and not all those kids need medical attention, but people just think, oh, you like someone of the same sex? Why don't you just pray on it? And then you'll get married when you're 14, just like good Christians. If trans folk were to start a religion, would that be allowed? Would that be allowed? Would it afford religious freedoms and tax exemption? Oh, so if trans people started a religion, would they get religious benefits, tax exemptions, and all that? I believe the truth. Yes. I mean, this is true of all nonprofit groups, whether you're the Satanic Temple, an atheist group, what have you. If you're starting a nonprofit and that includes religious groups, yeah, you get the benefits of churches or non-religious organizations. So, I mean, yes. Sounds like a kick-ass religion. If I was a foster kid, I feel like I'd suffer much, much more being under someone who couldn't accept me as I am. Literally would be more emotional trauma. Yeah, and that's Vermont's position on this. These kids are going through enough. We do not want to add to their misery. We want them to be in loving homes. It's not a lot to ask. And yet for these Christian couples, it's like, nope, sorry, too much. You're asking us to love these kids? Sorry, not what we signed up for. Everyone I knew growing up has left the Catholic Church, so we technically got the last laugh. Yep, and that's not over. They're still leaving. All right. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe. I got one more story for you, and then I'm going to call it here. This is interesting. Okay. So there was a meeting recently geared toward Christian lawmakers because they only represent like 99% of elected officials. And they met at Liberty University, Jerry Falwell's old haunts. And basically, they were gathering to share best practices and all that. Like, hey, I'm a Christian lawmaker in Louisiana, and I passed this bill, and now all of you should pass this bill in your states. And they videotaped this, like it's up there for people to see. And one of the things they were talking about one of their biggest success stories over the past year, which is trying to get Christian chaplains into public schools. And some states have many states have proposed it. 3 states have actually passed this into law, and many more states are probably going to work out the kinks, and they're going to do it in the year ahead. And what was interesting is that there was one panel of the so-called experts when it comes to chaplains in schools. And one of the things they were talking about is how do you overcome the obstacles with bills trying to get chaplains in schools? And one panelist basically said, we got a lot of pushback from Satanists. They said, if you pass this law, we're going to get satanic chaplains into public schools. And I'm going to show you what he said in a second. But all of it just confirmed the idea that these people are not interested in helping kids. They're not interested in religious pluralism or religious freedom. They are only interested in Christian supremacy. Okay? That's what the bottom line is. And if you're not aware, just to give you a quick recap, getting chaplains in schools has been the latest and most effective attempt to shove religion into public schools for the past year. 14 states have proposed or passed legislation to give permission to public schools to bring chaplains onto their staff. And supporters of these laws say it's a way to address staffing shortages and improve mental health. The opponents, the correct people, they say, no, students deserve qualified experts, not randos with questionable credentials who clearly want to proselytize. Like, if you want to help kids, hire more social workers, hire more counselors, get mental health experts. Don't get Baptist chaplains from across the street. Who cares what their credentials are? And some Republicans have openly said this is all about representing God's presence within our public schools. That was the Texas state senator who proposed that state's bill and got it passed. And while the language of all these bills vary from state to state, which is why they were discussing it at this meeting, some of them would allow schools to bring in local pastors who have no formal certification to work with kids while dismissing trained professionals. Like, you could replace the qualified people with unqualified chaplains. Like, that's what happened in Texas. That's a disaster. Even in Texas, like, more than 100 chaplains, religious chaplains, signed a letter urging state school boards, don't do it. We know you have permission now. Don't do it. Don't bring us on. It's a bad idea. They're really warning these people it's a horrible plan. But then the question emerges, if some of these states, like Texas, are allowing chaplains in schools, are they going to allow a Muslim chaplain? What about a humanist chaplain? A satanic chaplain? Because guess what? They all exist. And what would these chaplains that they do bring on, what are they going to say to LGBTQ students who are struggling with their sexual orientation or gender identity? So these are fair questions that are, if they bring on Christian chaplains in their school districts and we see what happens and they're preaching and they're telling kids not to be gay or whatever, like, you're going to see lawsuits. And the reason a lot of school districts are iffy, even if they have permission to bring in chaplains, the reason they haven't really jumped on this yet is because they know they would be inviting more lawsuits in the future, whereas right now they don't need to deal with that. So this is kind of the issue we're talking about here. Now, the one organization that's been really pushing for this is called the National School Chaplain Association. It's a Christian ministry. It's a lobbying group, the National School Chaplain Association. What do they say? NSCA is a Christian chaplain ministry that provides spiritual care, counseling, and support to everybody, right? You can help them, right. Statement of faith. Got to have a statement of faith because it's all about Christians. And the last thing I want to show you here, look at this. How many people are served by their chaplains? 27 million. How many schools have implemented this? 30,000 plus. I don't believe that number. I think that's just the number of schools that exist in the states where these chaplaincy bills have been legalized. I think that's where that number is coming from. But the other thing I want to show you, they mentioned their board of directors. All right. First of all, that guy on the far left, Rocky Malloy, go look up his profile when you get a chance on Wikipedia. You'll have a wild day with it. But I don't want to talk about him. He's not the important one. The name you got to remember in this batch is this lady in the middle, Julie Pickren. I'll bring her up in a second, but she's on the board of the NSCA. So that's the first name I want to show you. By the way, Rocky Malloy, the head of that organization, he said, I'm not worried about satanic chaplains because they don't count. He said that in an interview like a couple of months ago, and it was a dumb thing to say then. But just FYI, which states have passed these bills for chaplains in schools? Texas, Florida, Louisiana. Okay. So they were having this panel discussion. Where was this taking place? It was taking place at a meeting of the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. That was the group sponsoring this. If you remember the name Jason Rapert, he was the Arkansas legislator, Christian nationalist, the guy who put a 10 Commandments monument outside the state capitol. He ran for lieutenant governor with Sarah Huckabee Sanders on separate tickets, but they ran. And then he lost in the primary, and now he's out of politics. So now he runs this group, the National Association of Christian Lawmakers, NACL, SALT, because they're salt of the earth, get it? And this is their national policy conference. And on this panel, I'm going to show you in a second, there were 3 people. One of them was Julie Pickren, the lady I just showed you. She's on the board of the National School Chaplain Association. She's also on the Texas Board of Education. There's another guy I need to show you. It's this dude right here, Louisiana State Senator Mark Abraham. He was also there. And the third guy that I need to show you is this dude right here. That right there is Jim Schmidt. He is the legislative ambassador and executive team member for the National School Chaplain Association. So those 3 people were all talking about this. I'm going to show you the clip. Just listen to what they say about like overcoming obstacles for these chaplaincy bills.
But the left side will make innuendos. Well, now we're going to have Satanists as chaplains. First, satanic is not a church, it's not a religion, it's anti-God. So you just say, okay, and move on to the next one. Because I don't know any of you that would hire a Satanist, so you just look at their background and don't hire them. I mean, I don't know people in their engineering firm or teachers or baseball coaches that have an outright Satanist and say, oh yeah, well, we'll hire you. So it's not an argument, it's a narrative.
The only other comment, one of the oppositions, well, anybody can be a chaplain then. I mean, a Muslim can come in and be a chaplain. And we just said, no, it has to be a certified chaplain. So that's how we kind of got around that.
Yeah, thank you, Florida, for saying yes to it. And it was the NACL that really helped move it forward. And Ron DeSantis, upon signing it, says Satanists don't even apply. That's what he said to the media.
If you look at the Department of Defense list of approved chaplains for the DoD, there's not any Satanists. They're not there. They're not, according to the Supreme Court, they are not an organized religion. So it's a lot of fear mongering among the narrative.
There are crazy people. We had the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster and a minister from the Church of Satan actually showed up and told all my school board members that in fact that they were going to apply to be a chaplain and all this kind of stuff. But I think there's actually, what I was told is that there actually are appeals court at the federal level precedents out there that basically make it clear that the Church of Satan is not a legitimate religious faith and is not entitled to protection as Christianity would be.
Can you imagine these people just like, they're saying it out loud. And when the lawsuits come, and they will inevitably come, it's like, yeah, they are very clearly saying, you guys, it's just for Christians. None of these other groups really count. And we've designed our laws to make sure we're excluding them. Like, they're literally giving away the game, right? But there's a lot of ignorance in the stuff they said. And maybe it's a given since they've never read a second book in their life. But for what it's worth, let me show you a couple things here. First of all, Satanism, the Satanic Temple, these are not, they said, they're not real organizations. They're not, the Supreme Court says they're not a religion. Guess what? The Satanic Temple, the IRS has designated it a tax-exempt church. So they qualify as a church, which means they're qualified to set their own rules when it comes to chaplains, okay? There's that. There are also famously, you could look this up, humanist chaplains. There are groups that will certify you as a humanist chaplain. You can become a non-theistic chaplain as well. So that's a thing. What about the argument that like the Department of Defense says Satanism isn't a religion? Well, guess what? I have a spreadsheet here from the military where this is from, I think, 2022, where they listed, we updated our list of religions. And look at what's on this list. Because they retroactively said, going back to 2017, we're going to allow these religions. But look at some of the things they added to the list here. Pagan, humanist. These were not on the list like 10 years ago, but they said, yeah, we're going to start including this. Some of these have been on there for a while. What else did they have on? Oh, there we go. Wicca, magic, spiritualist, atheist, agnostic, no preference. Like, even if Satanism isn't on that list, there are plenty of places Satanists could go, even if they're in the military and they need a category. So there's also that. So if groups representing non-theistic people want to bestow the title of chaplain on anybody, they're good to go. The laws give them the ability to do so based on their own standards. You know who agrees with me? The Republican who sponsored this law in Florida. Here's what she said at the time. Florida State Senator Erin Grell, a Republican who represents Vero Beach, blah, blah, blah. She said she is concerned about the potential of satanic priests taking advantage of the legislation she sponsored. But I think as soon as we get in the middle of defining what is religion and what is not, and whether or not someone can be available and be on a list, we start to run up to constitutional problems. Like, yeah. So when Ron DeSantis signs that bill into law and says, well, it doesn't matter, Satanism isn't a religion or whatever, like, he's literally undercutting what his own Republican Party said and making it worse down the line. The reason there's no lawsuit in Florida yet is because their law doesn't go into effect until July 1st. And I think what you're going to have is a Satanist or a humanist try to be appointed a chaplain in a school and get rejected, and then maybe you could file the lawsuit. They have told me they have every intention of doing that. Now, what about Muslims? Because that was brought up too. Guess what? The guy said, in my state, he's from Louisiana, that state senator, he said, our initial bill said they had to be chaplains, but we changed it before it was passed to say certified chaplains. So now Muslims are excluded. That's how we got around that. Well, guess what? There are Muslim organizations right here. Whoops, where did it go? I lost my screen share. Let me try that again. There are Muslim organizations that will do exactly that. Check this out. Yeah. Association of Muslim Chaplains, endorsement, certification. You can get it. What about in the military? We have that too. There's a Muslim chaplain talking about life in the US military. Like, there are Muslim groups who certify chaplains. I'm not saying there are a gazillion of them, but they exist. You cannot exclude them from any of these bills. So here's the thing that boggles my mind here. The National Association of Christian Lawmakers is urging lawmakers to pass these bills in their states without giving any thought to how they are legally sound. They think they'll get away with it because there haven't been any lawsuits yet, but it's early, and because they've convinced themselves their bills are legitimate. And when they talk, they make it very clear they don't know what the law is. And when they're in front of other Christians, the masks come off and they just laugh about how these bills allow Christians in, but keep everyone else out. I asked an attorney with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, what do you think about this clip that I just showed you all? And he told me that if these chaplains think that they're going to get away with this, to cut it short, they will not be able to do so. Okay. Here's what he said. This is Chris Line with FFRF, and I'll just show you this middle paragraph here. The fact that they admit they want to prohibit chaplains who have a scary religion, like members of the Satanic Temple, confirms that they envision chaplains promoting religion to students who do not already share the chaplain's religious beliefs. They say at the bottom here that Christianity is going to be the only game in town. That's what they want. So, like, these people are setting themselves up for the lawsuits. None of these panelists care about getting trained professionals in public schools because they're not interested in helping kids. They don't care about mental health, at least not in a secular way. They're using schools as indoctrination playgrounds, and they believe right-wing legislatures and right-wing judges will give them the leeway they need to push their religion and only their religion onto children. I can't believe they said it out loud. I can't believe they promoted it on tape, which is how I got a hold of it. But this is what they're saying to each other behind closed doors. All right. I'm going to take questions here, and I think I'm going to wrap it up after that. My grandchildren are in the Florida and Arkansas school systems. I'm worried. Yeah, and as with all public schools, and it depends on where they're going to school, what state they're in, because there are really good public school districts in very red states. But the policy overall, like the bars are set very low, and the teachers don't always get the support they need. So it depends where they're going, but like, yeah, it's disturbing when you're in a state where they don't care about education, where they take money out of the public schools and give them to private religious schools, which is we talked about last week. That's what a lot of them are doing too. Bro, he's literally advising schools to discriminate based on religion. Just wow. I'll tell you what my dream is right now. My dream is there is a lawsuit over this and they use my clip. That would make me very happy. What board or group certifies people's credentials to be a chaplain? It depends on which the group we're talking about. There are formal groups that will give you a certification, like you have to go through their training, but they get to set the rules on what qualifies because there is no standard that everyone uses. But the amazing thing is in some of these bills that are proposed or passed, they just say if a group says this guy's a certified chaplain, that counts and the school can take them in. Like the public school can put them on the list. So like they're not getting certified by the school, it's getting certified by some outside party where the standards are all over the place. So like if I created a religion and I said, give me $5 and I'll call you a certified chaplain, there's nothing stopping that person from being a certified chaplain in the Church of Hemant or something like that. So like it doesn't matter because again, these bills, they're not interested in caring about kids. And here's the fear. What's stopping some crazy right-wing megachurch pastor from saying, hey, men, we don't care about the women. Hey, men, come up to me after service is over, and I'm going to get all of you like a little certificate that says you are a certified chaplain, and then I want you to go to your local public school district and tell them you're a certified public school chaplain, get on the list, and let's get you in the public schools. Like, if you think that can't happen, what do you think they did when all those pastors were like, I'll sign a vaccine exemption form for you? They don't know their medical history. They don't know what they're doing, but they'll just do it because it gets the outcome they want. And they're like, I'm a religion. I can get away with it. What's stopping them from doing that here? So you don't need any credentials for the purpose of this bill, these types of bills. All right. We're going to call it a night here. Again, if you go to that link, you can join the Friendly Atheist Convention, which I will not be a part of because I'll be out of town. But Den will be there. A bunch of others will be there in 2 weeks. That will be through Discord, through the Friendly Atheist Discord. And there's the link for that. I may be back next Saturday to do one of these. Otherwise, I'll see you all either next week or in 3 weeks. Is there anything else, Den, that I am forgetting here? I don't think so. There are some churches that will confer some credentials online. Oh, thanks for this. Like, yeah, you'll get updates in the video comments and you could email right there. Den, if you have any questions, I'll leave that up for a second. If any of you are interested in the Friendly Atheist Convention. And what was that other question, Den? That was there a second ago. We'll find that here. Mistake. It's all good. All right. I'm out. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you, Den, for helping out. I'll see you all very soon.